Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our service of worship. We are Downers Grove Community Church. If you are a visitor, I'd like to extend a special welcome to you. We have very special visitors today. We have my sisters-in-law. Everybody say hi, Jan. Hi, Joan. I'm very thankful for my sisters-in-law because all the sisters talk on the phone and then I get the remote. So I'm just kidding. I don't like the remote. We have a number of announcements, so I want to take care of some business before we have a really nice service or worship service planned. We have trophies of grace with us this morning. The first thing I want to call your attention to is in the bulletin there is this for our college care packages. If you have a college student or know a college student, please fill one out and return it. How are we returning these, Shauna? Return it with your $10 shipping cost in the deacon's basket and they will get it to the right people. So there's that. We are about to start next week, along with about 700 other churches in the area, our series called Explore God Chicago. We've been talking about that for a number of weeks. There was a article in the Daily Herald about it this past week. We have placed an ad that will run 2 weeks in a row in this Suburban Life newspaper. I meant to bring a copy of it, but I forgot it. And we have 10 lawn signs. If you're moved to put a lawn sign in your lawn, there are 10 of them. Please go ahead and take one. I assembled them yesterday. They're nice and sturdy. The lawns are all thawed out because of the warm weather, so go ahead and take a lawn sign. I would encourage you to do that. And also, if you are inviting someone to come to a small group, or if you're hosting a small group at your house, we have these that you can personally hand to someone. I'm going to put them over here by the offering boxes, which, by the way, Luke Campbell asked me if you have not taken your offering envelopes, they're over there. So I'm going to put those over there. And at this time, I'll have Jenny come up. She has an announcement.
Last week in the Power Zone, I had 22 kids, which, praise God, we had a great time. We're averaging about 12 to 15 each week, so we're really excited. Moving forward into the future, we want to make sure that the precious children are provided not only with the highest quality programming, but that all of their needs are being met in every possible way. I have a couple of new ideas and would love to have the opportunity to talk to all of you and share my vision so we can work together to continue to expand this programming. I've also set up an activity station in the fellowship hall, which you may have seen. It's a 4-cubby container there on the side by the seating area. So I understand that kids go through different phases and sometimes they just want to stay with you during the service rather than be in the nursery or Power Zone. The activity center gives you the opportunity to enjoy the service in the seating area outside the sanctuary and also gives you access to keeping your children active and engaged. So there are toys in those bins, there's puzzles, coloring pages, just stuff that you can have access to if for any reason you need to be outside during the service. I also have a survey that I have prepared, which will be going home with you today, and it would be really helpful if you could just take a couple minutes and fill it out. And then next week, immediately following the morning worship service, I'm going to have a brief meeting. So any of you interested, even if you don't have a child in that age group, but you maybe would like to volunteer or you want to just partner with me in continuing to expand that, please feel free to do that. We're going to meet in the Power Zone room, which is down the education hall, immediately following the service, and childcare will be provided. So, okay? So Lou and I are really excited. We're going to be going on Saturday, January 19th, to the Fitness Formula Club to have an outing with our junior high and high school kids. We're going to be rock climbing. And so if you have kids, grandkids in that age group, and you would like to get them signed up for that, I'm going to have a sign-up sheet, which is right here, which is going to be right outside in the fellowship hall. So feel free to add your name to that email address, and then we'll contact you. Also, we're inviting those families as well. So if you want to make it a day for your family and come along with other siblings, that would be great. I'm going to invite Jacob to come up for a minute. Jacob is the manager at the Fitness Formula Club where we're going to be going. So he's just going to talk to you for a second about that.
Morning, everyone. All right, like she was saying, my name is Jake. I'm the manager over at Fitness Formula Clubs, FFC for short. Basically, what we'll be doing is for 10:30, right?
Right.
So from 10:30 to about 11:30, going to be having everyone come on in, do some rock climbing. I've personally been working with FFC for about 4 or 5 years now, so I can guarantee that if some of you are a little weary about the idea of rock climbing, I get it. Same boat. But I can promise you, perfectly safe environment. It's a lot of fun. So absolutely come on by if you have the opportunity to. Would absolutely encourage it. But you never know what you fall in love with. So if you've never gone rock climbing before, your kids have never gone rock climbing before, absolutely come on out, give it a try, see what you think.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Jacob. So we're going to be leaving the church here at 9:30 on Saturday the 19th. So if you need any transportation for your children, we will have transportation for them. If not, you can just meet us at 10:30 at the Fitness Formula Club. See me if you have any questions, and I'll get you all the information, okay? And thanks again for all your support. Really appreciate it.
I had the pleasure of being Jake's mentor as he made his profession of faith, and I can't look at him without remembering how you can move through a hot dog faster than anybody I've ever seen. So, well, I remember lots of other stuff too. I have one more announcement. We will be serving at Christ Temple this coming Saturday, the 12th. I'm going to be cooking Judy's world-famous Sloppy Joe, but we need some supplies. Dee, put your hand up way in the back. Dee heads up Rafa Ministry, which serves as the vehicle through which we partner with Christ Temple at 95th and the Dan Ryan. If you are interested in purchasing some supplies for that, just real quickly, I need like 30 pounds of ground beef and pasta salad to serve about 80 people. So if you're moved to provide any of that, email me, call me, or come up and talk to me. I'm happy to talk to you about that. How much turkey and ham have we served over there in the last few weeks? Like 100 pounds of turkey. Like 100 pounds of turkey, 80 pounds of ham, like 18 million potatoes, and I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff. So if you feel like coming out, I'm going to be looking for people to serve with me. Trust me when I tell you, you will not only be a blessing, but you will be blessed. It's truly a great experience and a great way to show the love in the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. So, I'd like to begin this morning by asking you to think about the best meal you ever ate. The best meal you ever ate. Not necessarily your favorite restaurant, and not necessarily your favorite food, but the best meal you ever ate. I mean, certainly we all have favorite foods and favorite restaurants. So for me, thin crust sausage and onion pizza from Aurelio's, you can't beat it. We had it last night. Delicious. For me, hot dogs, Lou Campbell knows what I'm going to say. Gene and Jude's, First Avenue and Grand Avenue. You get the hand-cut fries all wrapped up in there. Hamburger, the Bison Burger at Ted's Montana Grill, medium rare. Let's see, breaded pork tenderloin, Old Warsaw on Cermak Avenue in Berwyn, old school. Potatoes and dumplings and gravy. Fish, the broiled snapper at Greek Island. Not the one up here, the one on Halstead in the city. Maybe start with a little saganaki. Steak. Everybody's got to have a favorite steak. I do anyway. The bone-in filet at Chicago Cut on LaSalle on the river downtown. That was back in the day when I had an expense account. Now Pastor Howard and I get the $2 tacos up here at the taco place. For homemade food, my wife makes a killer meatloaf and a killer spinach lasagna. And for all you guys who don't think real men eat spinach lasagna, real men eat spinach lasagna. I'm just saying it's delicious. And a homemade carrot cake from scratch, delicious. I like to think that my pot roast will give all of your Dutch grandmas a run for their money. So, just saying. One of my, Donna Cotis is shaking her head. One of my favorite meals, though, none of those are really my favorite. They're my favorite foods, but not my favorite meals. One of my favorite meals took place in late December of 1985 at a place called the Comeback Inn. It's not there anymore, the old Comeback Inn in Melrose Park. I was on a first date with a young lady named Judy Awanga, and we had gone to a show at the Victory Garden Theater in Lincoln Park and then stopped for a libation at the old John Barleycorns and ended up late night at the Comeback Inn in Melrose Park. And it was a cold night, and we were sitting by the fire and we ordered our food, and Judy ordered a hamburger, and she said, and I'd like a slice of raw onion on that. And I thought, I could be married to this girl. I really did. 6 weeks after that, we were engaged. True story. But the best meal I ever ate was at a little Chinese restaurant called the New Star on North Avenue in Elmwood Park. And it was the night Judy and I were going to tell my dad that we were getting married. It was in about March of 1986-ish. Not 86-ish, it was 86, but March-ish. And my dad had already met Judy, and I knew that he liked her, but I didn't know how he was going to take the news that we were getting married. And that had nothing to do with Judy. It had to do with the fact that we had only been seeing each other not a very long time. And also, let me just say, I hadn't always made the best choices in relationships. And, you know, my dad was always saying, now you need to slow down. Something I was never very good at in life. So anyway, we go to the New Star on North Avenue in Elmwood Park. And I tell my dad that Judy and I are going to get married. And in a way that only he could. I remember to this day, he got up. My dad never had daughters. He got up, he gave Judy a hug, and he said, "Welcome to the family, doll." That was my dad. And that was the best meal I ever ate. Now, Judy always says that I remember every restaurant meal I ever had. I don't remember what I had that night, but I do remember what my dad had. He had chop suey, because that's about as adventurous as my dad would get in a Chinese restaurant. My mom used to make this thing called Polish chop suey. I'm not even going to talk about that. That was just wrong. Oh, this just popped in my head. For my 40th birthday, Judy took us all out to eat to Benihana's up on 22nd Street or over in Butterfield. And I ordered sushi for an appetizer, and my dad, dead serious, turned to Judy and said, "I didn't raise him that way." Anyway, that night was the best meal I ever had, because it was full of affection and love and warmth. And I felt like my life was coming together. And, you know, I was with my two favorite people. And it was just the best meal I ever had. And I think about that often. And I have to say, as I was thinking about the sermon today, there's something fundamentally human about sharing the events and passages of life over a meal that make it a great meal. It's not just about the food. And I'm hoping or guessing that you've had that experience too. Maybe you had a meal at a restaurant. Maybe you cooked a meal and you put your heart and soul into it. Or maybe someone cooked a meal for you and they put their heart and soul into it. but there was laughter, and there was affection in the room, and there was warmth. And that's just this fundamentally human thing that happens when we share a meal with someone. And as I was studying the scripture passage for today, we understand that as humans. And Jesus, as human, also understood it, because very often his ministry took place over a meal. And so when you partake of a meal like that, first of all, you're celebrating the presence of the Almighty, because food is a product, is a bounty of creation. The earth is designed by God to produce food. It was so with Adam and Eve, and it's so today. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord prepares a table for me." The Lord prepares food for us. The earth is designed to produce food. Likewise, our bodies are made and designed. So, not only as nourishment and sustenance, but also as pleasure. I mean, is there any more pleasurable thing than on a Saturday night eating thin crust pizza from Aurelio's? It's delicious. Our bodies are designed not only to be nourished by food, but to enjoy food. So when we're doing that, we're celebrating what God has made, by definition. And it's a great way to connect, to have communion with the people around us. So when you think about your favorite meal, I'm willing to bet that there were people you loved around you. There was laughter. There was affection. There was warmth. There was love. And it was just one of those things that made it the best meal you ever had. So let me go backwards now. With that setting, as you're thinking about the favorite meal you ever had or the best meal you ever had, I want to invite you to hear these words from the book of Mark. Mark is believed to have been the first gospel that was written, even though it's not placed first in the Bible. And it's when Jesus shares a meal. So Mark chapter 2, starting in the 13th verse. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners, and the Bible I have puts sinners in quotation marks. We'll talk about that in a second. With the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." The first thing to notice in this passage is that there's this guy named Levi whose father's name is Alphaeus. So Levi is a Jewish name, but Alphaeus is a very Greek name. So you can surmise from that tax collectors were a part of the educated class. So I don't know if Levi's father was actually Greek or had a Greek name, but there would have been Greek influence in his house. And as a matter of fact, the book of Matthew that was authored, this Levi is the Matthew who was one of the 12 disciples who also authored the book of Matthew. The book of Matthew is written in a fairly educated form of Greek. So Levi comes from an educated house. As a tax collector, he would have been of some means. And so he's doing his thing. Mark records that he's at the tax collector's booth. To say it another way, he's at his office. He's at work. And Jesus comes along, and he goes into his office or his booth, and he says, "Follow me." And Levi does. He leaves his job behind. What's the very next thing Levi does? he invites Jesus to dinner. He invites him over to his house. Now, I don't know if Levi/Matthew was married or not, but I can imagine that he would have been married. He was a man of some means, even though tax collectors were absolutely despised, because not only did they collect and cheat on taxes by and large, but also because they were viewed as traitors. They were agents of the Roman government, and therefore they were viewed by all Jewish people as traitors to their faith and to their nation. So they were very much outcasts. That being said, they were often wealthy, and so it's easy to imagine that he had a wife, and I can imagine that scene. He comes home. Men did not cook in those days. It was the job of wives or servants. And I can imagine he came home and told his wife, honey, my new boss is coming over for dinner, and you need to prepare a feast, because I think there's going to be a lot of people here. And she's going, your new boss, your boss is Pontius Pilate. And he's saying, no, my new boss is this guy who's wandering around, and his name is Jesus, and by the way, he claims to be the son of David, the Messiah, and he's coming over for dinner. Because after Levi gets his call, the first thing he does is invite Jesus over for dinner. And the book of Mark says that there were many tax collectors and many sinners at Levi's house. Now I want to unpack that just a little bit. That word sinner that Mark uses in Greek is haratolos. It means not only people who were morally sinful, but people who were social outcasts, people who didn't fit the social norms. So laying around at Levi's house were people who were cast off and cast away and cast aside by the society of the day. And that phrase that says Jesus was eating with them is another Greek word, sanamakiahi. It sounds Hawaiian. It literally means reclining at a feast. So in the custom of the day, people did not really sit at a table. They were reclining around, and Levi being of some means, they probably had nice rugs on the floor and maybe some pillows, and they're sharing a feast. So in other words, to get right to it, Jesus is laying around with a bunch of riffraff. And not just a few of them, but lots of them. Mark says there were many. And Levi's and his wife, if there was one, are feeding them dinner. Jesus is laying around with the rabble of the day. Now, you got to ask yourself, at least I do, why is he doing it? Why is he laying around having dinner with tax collectors? Sinner is put in parentheses because it's euphemistically used for prostitutes. And let me say something about that. Few people in the day chose to be a prostitute. There were temple prostitutes and brothels where there were prostitutes. Few women chose that life. There were also male prostitutes. Usually they were people who had, women who had had babies out of wedlock, women who were unable to conceive, and therefore they were not marriageable. So their only way to make a living would have been either live in the streets or become a prostitute. So it's conceivable to think that Mary, if things had gone different, could have had that lifestyle. But no one chose that. So they were cast off with the tax collectors and the other unsavory characters of the day. And Jesus is literally laying around with them having dinner. And I can imagine that he's interested in their lives. And I'd be willing to bet Jesus was a great listener. I'd be willing to bet that if you had dinner with him, he would say to you, Nina, tell me what's going on in your life. I care about you. Or he would say, Donna, tell me what's troubling you. I care about what's going on with you. And then he would listen to what you have to say. I'll bet you Jesus was a great listener. And can you imagine these people who were the cast-offs? Because make no mistake, Where you got invited to dinner or didn't get invited to dinner was a mark of your social status. These people had no social status. They did not get invited to dinner. They did not get invited to the table. Can you imagine how warm and inviting and comfortable Jesus would have made them at this dinner, that so many of them came and so many of them stayed? They're literally laying around with the Messiah, who's listening to their troubles and their cares and their worries. I'll bet you Jesus was a great listener. I'll bet you we could take a lesson out of that. And so the dinner goes on, and of course the Pharisees don't like it. They didn't like anything he did. And they say to some of the disciples, "What's with Jesus? Why is he hanging out with sinners? Why is he eating?" And by the way, eating was considered an act of intimacy. Hanging out with them was one thing. Eating with them was another thing. You had to touch the same food they were touching and use the same utensils they were using. You're hanging out with prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners? What's up with that? And Jesus has a response to them. Doctors don't heal people who are well. They heal people who are sick. And Jesus is saying, that's my mission. I didn't come for the righteous. I came for the sinners, the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the people who have been cast aside. Those are the people I came for. Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus, and here's an important point, I think, that doesn't mean that Jesus only hung out with the sinners and his disciples, because he hung out with the Pharisees too. The book of Luke records at least 3 times when he had dinner with Pharisees in their houses, at least one time. And so that means that he hung out with people who disagreed with him, people who didn't see eye to eye with him, people who didn't like him, people who even wanted him dead. People didn't just hang out with, Jesus didn't just hang out with people who liked him and who followed him. Jesus hung out with people who disagreed with him, because he wanted to listen to them too. And he wanted to teach them and instruct them. But he hung out with all kinds of people. And he loved having dinner with them. So I would like to make a suggestion for us. I would like to make a church-wide New Year's resolution. I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions, mostly because I resolve to lose weight every year, and it doesn't always go that way. Of course, it's hard to do that when you're eating Aurelio's pizza, but there is that. I do have a New Year's resolution. I did make a New Year's resolution. Not all of you were able to see it. I resolved never to wear boring socks. So I have red socks that have the pictures of my dog on them that Jill got me for Christmas. Jill buys me all these funky socks, so I resolved never to wear boring socks. That's my resolution. But I'd like to make a church-wide resolution. Stay with me. President Trump talks about building a wall. You're not going to hear me talk about politics from the pulpit. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. I don't know. You can all decide for yourselves. But I would like to propose, as a church, that we build a table. Not literally, metaphorically, that we build a table and we invite people to that table and we get to know them. We can make a start if you want to come with me on Saturday to 95th and State to serve Sloppy Joe. The small group that met at Judy's and my house for the 5 Signs of a Healthy Christian, by the way, we have a whole bunch of, there's 17 people signed up to come to our house. Brave guy, I said it in front of all of you, huh? We are all serving at CCK this coming Wednesday, if you want to come out and join us. Trust me when I tell you, you will be blessed. You will be blessed. Hang out with people from Ray Graham who society has cast aside, and people who maybe aren't quite like you. Let's build a table. That's my New Year's resolution for this church. We could do it at 95th and State. We could do it here at CCK. Next week, I'm going to talk about, we're going to roll out a program we used to do years ago called Dinner is Served. We can have communion with each other. But I would propose that we as Christians are called to build a table and to have communion over a meal the way Jesus did it with people who maybe otherwise wouldn't get invited.